Bill 10, an act to amend the Fire Protection and Prevention Act 1997 and the Private Career Colleges Act 2005 in relation to rescue and emergency services training for firefighters and firefighter trainees. Ms. French.
Recognize the member from Oshawa.
Thank you, Speaker. I move second reading of Bill 10, an act to amend the Fire Protection and Prevention Act 1997 and the Private Career Colleges Act 2005 in relation to rescue and emergency services training for firefighters and firefighter trainees.
Good bill. Ms. French has moved second reading of Bill 10, an act to amend the Fire Protection and Prevention Act 1997 and the Private Career Colleges Act 2005 in relation to rescue and emergency services training for firefighters and firefighter trainees pursuant to Standing Order 98. The member has 12 minutes for her presentation.
Thank you, Speaker. Today, together with the families and friends of two men who tragically died, I am calling on this government to support and pass my private member's bill, Bill 10, the Brunt Kendall Act, to ensure the safety of future Ontario firefighters and trainees. I've been working with these families and firefighter safety advocates for 3.5 years now. It has been an emotional journey, but it is my honour to welcome many of them back to Queen's Park today. I'd like to welcome the Brunt family, Adam's parents, Al and Christy Brunt, and family and friends Debbie and Larry Brunt, Brent Pierce, Tracy Pierce, Derek Reynolds, Terry Smith, and Mary Smith. We welcome the friends and family of Gary Kendall and recognize his family that are watching from home today. From the Ontario Professional Firefighters, we are joined by OPFFA Executive Vice President Mark Train and Oshawa Professional Firefighter Local 465 President Peter Dyson and Vice President Nathan Langale. TJ Thompson was a student with Adam in the course and joins us along with Alex Van Kralingen, a lawyer involved for over 8 years who spoke today at our press conference. Welcome. Speaker, my bill seeks to keep firefighter trainees safe in an unregulated private training environment. They are not firefighters. They are not protected. This bill is comprehensive legislation that creates an entire framework to approve, regulate, register, levy penalties, license and oversee private safety training in Ontario. I asked the Minister of Community Safety this morning if this government would support my bill, and he said that he rejected the premise of the question. I want to make the case very clearly to this government in hopes to change their mind. This bill has nothing to do with regulating or certifying firefighters. This is about protecting those who one day want to become firefighters and are vulnerable to a rogue, unregulated private training landscape. Speaker, 3.5 years ago, I learned of the death of Adam Brunt, a young man who wanted to be a firefighter and who tragically died during a private rescue training course. I felt heartsick and was compelled to know what had gone wrong. We then found out that another family, the family of Gary Kendall, had lost a loved one the same way 5 years before. It has been a long and emotional journey for everyone involved. It has been my privilege to know these families and to struggle through this exhausting and frustrating process with them. It has taken a long time to get here, but hopefully today we can finally move forward. Before we do, though, I would like to take us back a bit. The reason we are here is because two men died, and I want us to know who they were. Gary's daughter, Marissa, wrote this for me to share. Quote, Gary was 51 when he was involved in the ice water training exercise. Everything he did in life was for his family. When he joined the Point Edward Fire Department, he was beyond happy because it was something he could do to not only help protect his community, but it was something he could do to give back. End quote. Adam Brunt's father, Al, shared this on behalf of their family. Quote, Adam was our second child, born on January 31st, 1985. He touched many lives in his 30 years. He was unique with his own style sense. He was daring and fun-loving, always looking for new challenges. Adam wanted to be a firefighter like his uncle, a career in which he could dedicate his life to helping others. He had never been happier in school than when he was doing the firefighting program at Durham College. Adam had found his calling. We can only imagine the things he would have done if he was still with us. Both men died under similar tragic circumstances 5 years apart. Gary Kendall's family called for an inquest after his death in 2010, but there wasn't one. Instead, there was another death 5 years later and another family grieving. Like many firefighter hopefuls, Adam wanted to gain experience and pad his resume to compete for a job with a fire service. There are many private safety and private rescue courses marketed to firefighter hopefuls, and Adam found a Herschel rescue course on Facebook and assumed it was legit because others had taken it. However, it was an overnight weekend course with 12 students, and on the last run of the second day, all 12 students and the instructor jumped in the Saugeen River and floated down one after another through a narrow, swift-moving section of river between two sides of ice. One by one, they emerged through the narrow rapids, bobbing out the other side down the river, but Adam didn't. When he went through the narrows, he was forced under the water, and his exposed strap got caught on underwater metal. The young students had neither the skills nor the equipment to reach or save him. They desperately tried, but it was many minutes before actual firefighters arrived, and then it was not a rescue, but a recovery. TJ Thompson was one of the other students on that course and joins us today. She worked with the other students to try to reach him, even ran up to the road to flag down passing cars to beg for an ice scraper or an axe or rope or anything to use to reach him. They had no rescue equipment there. So many things went wrong that day, and nothing has been made right. Adam was a firefighter trainee. However, he was unprotected, and others continue to be, and here is why. These private companies are unregulated. They do not have to adhere to safety standards or industry best practices. Their homemade certificates mean nothing. Their only value is what the fire services give them at job interviews. It is a buyer beware situation. Trainees unfortunately assume private courses must be legitimate since they are allowed to operate in the province. Adam was a college student, but he took a private course that was not affiliated with his or any other college. Adam was unprotected by any laws or regulations under the Ministry of Training Colleges and University. Adam was not yet an actual firefighter, so he was not protected by the Ministry of Community Safety and Correctional Services. If he'd been employed by a fire service, their training would have had to have met safety requirements. Also, the Ministry of Labour does not have any jurisdiction because these training environments are not technically workplaces and these trainees are not employees. So while these firefighter trainees are learning to keep us safe, we still haven't figured out how to keep them safe. None of these ministries is technically responsible for these trainees or their safety. This is an area that doesn't fall under any ministry's jurisdiction, which is, in my way of thinking, makes it all of our responsibility. And we can fix this today. Alex Van Kralingen spoke earlier at our press conference. He was the lawyer for the Kendall family in 2010 and again during this inquest. He has invested much time into pursuing justice and solutions. He has said, quote, "It is crazy given everything that we regulate in our everyday lives that this sort of high-risk and technical firefighter training is not regulated. The government has the power to fix this problem, and this matter needs to be dealt with now. This is not a partisan issue. Keeping firefighters and pre-service students safe is not controversial," end quote. Mr. Van Kralingen has also had the opportunity to speak with the current Labour Minister when she was the PC critic for the Ministry of Community Safety. In fact, part of her letter I'd like to share now. Quote, "I am writing to you as the PC critic for community safety to express my support for the jury recommendations arising out of the inquest into the deaths of volunteer firefighter Gary Kendall and pre-service firefighting student Adam Brunt, both of whom tragically lost their lives during separate training exercises operated by the same unlicensed private company. It is clear that establishing clear training standards and regulations, along with proper mechanisms of oversight and regulation, would prevent further deaths and/or injuries." Speaker, end quote. I hope that this government will decide to stand up for safety and standards and will pass this bill through to committee. I would also like to share part of a letter from Ms. Thompson, who, as I mentioned earlier, has been a relentless advocate since Adam's traumatizing death. She testified for hours at the inquest, and I thank her for her perseverance. As she has said, quote, "I was one of the 12 students training on the swift, icy Saugeen River on February 8th when Adam Brunt was killed. Adam's death was preventable in many ways and completely unnecessary. Firefighters take risks when there is life and property to be saved and protected. This was training. There was no reason for unnecessary risks. Reasonable precautions for safety were not taken. It was not a sacrifice for another life. I call on this government to protect this vulnerable group of inexperienced trainees from unregulated training providers who choose to operate below the best industry practice. They need to be protected," end quote. Speaker, I have written 4 letters to government ministers. I have given 2 member statements. I have asked a direct question to the former Premier about regulating this industry. I held a press conference with the families and firefighters to call for an inquest. There has been a police investigation and a Ministry of Labour investigation. I have met with former ministers and their policy folks. We had a 2-week inquest in May of 2017. My motion to adopt all of the recommendations of the coroner's inquest jury passed through this House last year with unanimous support. I have introduced this bill twice. I asked another question of this government today, and this afternoon held another press conference, and now here we are deciding finally whether or not to regulate this rogue industry. When I spoke to the Minister of Community Safety and Correctional Services after question period, he said I should have told him about it. He had been briefed that it was about an unrelated issue. Well, how can that be possible? I have not surprised anyone. I am not playing gotcha with this government. I have sincerely worked to ensure this bill will pass and become law so that people don't die. So for the government and the government members who also were not clear about what was in this bill that I tabled back in July, most private members' bills require a few lines to solve a specific issue. This bill is unlike any that I have undertaken. And I want to thank Legislative Council, Lord love them, and the experts who worked with me line by line for months to get this right. It is 7 pages, essentially government legislation. It is comprehensive framework legislation that gives the responsibility for development and design of courses, their regulation and oversight to the Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management, where it belongs. It amends various acts and brings all of the pieces relevant to safety and rescue training under their jurisdiction where it belongs. Right now, the Minister of Community Safety and I could decide to make a few $1,000s on a weekend and advertise and offer a course on ropes or swiftwater rescue or high-angle rescue or bungee jumping rescue if we want to invent that, offer it to students, make up what we want to teach, charge whatever we want, cross our fingers no one is injured, print off a homemade certificate for them to show a fire chief at a job interview, because all of that is allowed. This bill changes that. Instructors would need to be licensed, satisfy the fire marshal that they would be teaching a standardized course that is needed in the province, meet basic safety standards during training, and appropriately assess and certify participants through the Office of the Fire Marshal upon completion. The bill lays out a penalty structure should something go wrong, or if the course instructors do not comply with the rules and standards. Students would be learning something of identified value and getting something measurable out of it. All of the students at the inquest said that if there was a legit course offered by the fire marshal or something like it, what they found on Facebook through this private company, that they all would have taken it because they would have known that it was legit. Every safety or rescue training course offered in the province should be registered, regulated, and overseen by the province. We should know what we're teaching and where. In this case, appropriately through the Office of the Fire Marshal, who is already responsible for training and curriculum firefighters. It is the right solution. Any fine-tuning the government would suggest, they are welcome to do, and it should happen at committee to ensure future trainees are protected. Gary and Adam are remembered as being men who wanted to keep others safe and protected. And I challenge all of us in this House to endeavour to do the same. We must pass this bill that establishes the framework for licensing, curriculum, regulation, penalties, and oversight of the private safety training industry and keep firefighter trainees safe. We must keep them safe, Speaker, because they would do it for us. Thank you. Very much, Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleagues around the legislature, to thank the members who spoke during this debate and discussion, and I again would like to thank the families and safety advocates who have been to Queen's Park now a lot of times for 3.5 years. So thank you very much for your support and your guidance. And I think it's important for this government and this House to do the right thing because it is about basic safety and creating a system to ensure that rogue enterprise can't operate in this province and endanger our future first responders and our future firefighters. This bill has been a labour of love born out of loss, and there was a lot of emotional and expert input that went into its creation, and the solutions are the right fit in order to pass the bill to committee. I appreciate the comments from the Minister of Community Safety. He is not wrong in his comments about the capacity of the Office of the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management. As it stands now, they do not have the capacity or the resources to enact all that is in this piece of legislation. But that's where it'll come out in committee, because I'll be honest, what happened, taking us back in history, with the last government, we were beating our heads against the wall, trying to get somewhere and having meetings with, assurances that this would move forward and it was a priority of the government. It got to the end of the session and I realized I was going to have to do it myself. And so along with Leg Council and the families and experts, we drafted that legislation on behalf of the government. We literally wrote what could have been government legislation, creating a structure and hoping for that capacity and the resources, to the minister's point, for the Office of the Fire Marshal, because it didn't belong. These individuals didn't belong to any ministry. We came up with the solution that could work. So it is a really strong piece of legislation, but I will absolutely admit that should this bill go to committee, It's going to take a fair bit of time because someone has to be responsible. Someone does have to take this on. We felt that the Office of the Fire Marshal was the right place, but it is very involved. It is sticky and tricky, and that is why it took us so darn long to come up with that piece of legislation. But it deserves a fair shake in committee. And by the one, heads up, it won't be one to time allocate. It's going to take the time. But this bill really has been my privilege to work on. You know, I am sorry that the government felt surprised by it, but at the same time, as I outlined, this has been a long time coming. It has been on the order paper. I gave full heads up that it was coming. I haven't been hiding it. So, you know, maybe that's an internal look at folks who are, you know, watching our bills. Some of them are going to be worthwhile and worth, you know, embracing and considering. So thank you for giving the opportunity to me and to the families today to have this bill move forward. And I thank the Minister for his support on this initiative. I hear him and believe him when he talks about prioritizing public safety, and this is a perfect opportunity to bring all of those minds to the table and ensure that it happens. So again, thank you to the family, and thank you, Speaker.